Hi Dave, how are you doing?
Hi Amy, I'm good. I'm well, thank you. Yes, it's a lovely morning. The sun's shining after the rain yesterday, so it's going to be a glorious day. How are you?
I hope so. Yeah, doing well as well. Had a nice day off yesterday. The rain kind of meant that it didn't really get out perhaps as I would have planned to do, but had a friend come round. We had some lunch in the garden. It was really nice, over the kind of shelter bit. So yeah, no, it was good just to spend time away from the desk doing some life-giving things. Hey, Dave, tell us this week, what's something that's made you smile?
Well, every week, I think you have it as well, as not as often, we have a family quiz and different people take turns in hosting. So this week, my brother Tel hosted with my niece Lucy, and they put a quiz together. But one thing they couldn't do was the sound one. It just wasn't working properly. So he sent me all the sound files. It was all voiceovers. It was famous people speaking. You had to guess who they were. Pretty simple stuff. But so I did that. It was the last round. But we have this little side bet every week. Someone always gets the ump. Someone always goes off on one for whatever reason. And so we sort of having bets on who that might be. And it was being okay up until then. Everything was fine until the last round. And then I was sort of playing these voiceovers. And Lauren and Jessma, two daughters, they want to be involved in this. And they were laughing behind me, said, "Oh, I know who that is. And isn't that funny?" And then got to the end of the round. And my uncle, Tim, bless him, he said, "That was pointless. Didn't hear a thing but all the laughter." So I thought, right. So had to play it all again. Made sort of, Lauren and Jess silence, and so Lauren walked off, and yeah. So there was a little. It was okay, Tim. Fair enough. It's a quiz, isn't it? So you want to sort of do your best. And after all that, he got 1 out of 10. So. So Tim, I love you, and it is a quiz, and but he's hosted it before, so he knows what it's like. What about you? What's made you smile this week?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's made me smile is, this book, I know we're going to discuss it in a minute, has really made me smile in the sense of it's been we're going to move on to really thought-provoking and quite challenging, but also really I don't know, just making us, and I know we've been chatting already before, but already starting to put into practice some of what we're reading. So one of the things that made me smile was, most people know, you can at least hear my accent, that I'm from Scotland and that's where my family live. And so at the end of last week, the regulations have changed in Scotland. So I haven't been able to travel home. I haven't seen family in a well, like many of us actually, we haven't seen our families, or all my family don't live in London. So one of the things that made me smile is that with the regulations starting to ease in Scotland, they're easing slower than what they're easing here. I'm going to be able to pop home up to Scotland for a couple of days in a couple of weeks' time. So that's really made me smile. I'm desperately missing family and missing people, and kind of watching them over the last couple of weeks start to be able to meet up socially distant has been really wonderful, but also quite difficult because I'm not part of that. So something that's made me smile is, the regulations were announced in Scotland that it would be easy. You could now stay at someone else's house, because I can't just go for the day. That's part of the problem. But now you can stay over at someone else's house. So the regulations, I think, eased at say 1 o'clock, and by 3:30 I'd sorted out the flights so I can pop home for a couple of days. So yeah, that's something that's really made me smile and actually really kept me going, to kind of be like, okay, in a couple of weeks I will be able to hug my niece, because in Scotland you're allowed to do that. So yeah, very excited about that. So yeah, that's definitely something that's made me smile.
Good.
Dave, I'm already hinting the book has been brilliant. And what really, actually, something that made me smile in the past week was I got a text from you on the day that you were reading the book, like a keynote, being like, "The book is so good, you're going to love it. Like, it's just going to," and I remember just seeing this text and being like, "Oh my goodness, this is the person that Dave was at school." Like, but then when I read it, I was totally then like, "This is brilliant." And I then sent you a very similar text.
Yeah.
So Dave, huh?
Go on.
No, I was going to say, tell us, well, maybe talk some more specifics, but what was it, if you could explain in just like a couple of sentences, that just captured your imagination in the section that we were reading this week?
Yeah, and I think we've spoken a little about this briefly as well. It says that, you know, last week it's all about what is the problem of busyness, what is the problem of this idea of hurry, and what, and then it's great. It moves into, well, this is the solution, but then it says, but once the solution isn't, it isn't more time. You know, if only we had more time. That's our answer to the things of life. And he goes straight in and said, actually, the answer is not more time. We all have the same amount of time in the world, 24 hours a day, you know, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We all have the same amount of time. It's just how we choose to use it. And part of me and you know this already, but just like maybe, you know, learning, we just need to be told again and again. And I think I'm certainly in a position of actually properly listening to what he's saying, and saying, it's not more time you need. You need to look at how you're spending your life. And you've spoken already about, you know, how long it takes to master something, 10,000 hours or something. Well, you know, I think he mentioned about video games, about, you know, up to the age of 21, you know, people have spent thousands and thousands of hours playing video games, and possibly mastering Call of Duty or wherever it is. But for what benefit? So I think it's not more time. That was the big thing that came out for me. You know, we've all got the same time. It's how we choose to use it.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy? That was the big thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, so many, like literally, we could probably discuss this chapter like page by page. But I think we've both been quite honest in our last couple of videos of saying that we're both aware that we're both workaholics. We tend to overwork, overcommit, overbusy, and then just live in a state of running around. And so almost like every page was speaking something around, why do we do this? What is some of the approach? And totally that the solution isn't more time. We just fill another day if we had another day to fill. I think the second thing for me after that was the chapter was very honest and countercultural around the fact that we all have limitations. Like, we live in a world where we're encouraged to think we're limitless. We can do whatever we want. There's always more time to do this. And, you know, as leaders, there's a real challenge around how do we lead from a place of vulnerability, but also from a place of how we can be real about the challenges that we're facing. You know, as a young female leader, I think a lot of the time I feel that I'm always having to prove people wrong. I think a lot of people think, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, we do that. Oh, they're young, they don't know what they're thinking about. Or, oh, they're a girl, they don't know. And it can be really hard to then let that light in a little bit around what are limitations, what are some of our things that we might find harder. I just found this book, and as a millennial, where you're supposed to have it all figured out all the time, and yet the reality is we don't have it all figured out, but we live in a world perhaps where we're under pressure to look like we have it figured out. I just thought it was really helpful, this bit in the book around we need to accept that we have limitations, because when we actually admit, when we actually get comfortable, it's not even an admitting thing, when we get comfortable in a world where we're not limitless, where we don't have it all figured out, actually a huge amount of freedom comes in that. And also there's a huge letting go of a burden of needing to have it limitless, when we actually think, actually God's the one that's limitless. We are limited, but we come to a God who can do all things. And I just find that such a freeing realization, you know?
No, and I like the bit when the way he sets out the book, where he really wants you to listen properly. He doesn't do it in normal sentences. He spreads out the words. And I love the bit it says, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
And neither can I.
Yeah.
And so he just says, just read it. And he reminds you, just read this bit again, slow down and read it again, and really listen to the words that you're saying. And so, yeah, so it's, the limitations, they're not bad, are they? They're not seen as negative. They're just seen as realist. We've got to be real. We've got to be real with what we're committing to. I remember a bishop once said to me, he says, Dave, he says, one thing that you'll find in ministry, he says, you've got to be careful what you say yes to. He said, because you will just stack up for yourself problems down the line. If if you're like me, you've committed to something, you're going to do it. And if I committed to something, I'll do it. But the trouble is, then you find I've got no time to do it and no energy. And that's one of the things that John talks about, is this idea of constantly feeling tired. That's not life, is it? The idea of actually, when someone asks you, how are you? I don't know what your response has been recently, but I'm just a bit tired. And I think, what sort of life is that if we're just constantly tired? Yeah, we're in this middle of this pandemic, and there have been pulls on our life and our ministry and whatever, absolutely. But one of the things that I found, which is quite interesting, having worked in the city and having seen people commit, endless hours and hours and hours, particularly those in trade, the old ways of doing trading. Yeah. You just lived hard, I worked hard, it's all hard. You had this thing called burnout. And I didn't realise until I read this that actually, in many ways, when we get to the point of burnout, there potentially could be no way back. And that really, wow, surely everything's redeemable. And what the author was saying, actually, if you really get to properly burnt out, there's nothing that will actually get you back to where you should be. I mean, wow, that certainly spoke to me, this idea of burnout. Yeah.
Hey, there was another bit in the chapter that spoke about running. John Mark Comer lives in Portland. It's a very cool, trendy, fit city in terms of how we hear people talk about Portland. And he talked.
Now, is it Nike or not?
Yeah.
What is it, Nike or Nike?
I say Nike, but let's get into the really important discussions this morning. What do you say, Dave?
Yeah, I'm Nike as well, so there you go. It's all right. We've done the scone bit. That's good. That's it, right. Get that out of the way.
Drop it in the comments. Are you Nike or Nike? Let us know the key things that you're learning from this video this morning. Anyway, John Mark Comer talks about a house opposite him is full of people who are pretty much models for Nike. They are runners. They put the work in every morning. John Mark Comer talks about he's having his coffee. They're going out for their run. They're sprinting. And he talks about we live in a place where we want that lifestyle. So we can look at super healthy people running down the road or whatever, and we think, we want to be like them. But actually, are we up for getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go for a run? There's a lot of things in life we want lifestyle. So we want the finished product, but are we willing to put the work in? I know we do that all the time. I was watching a sermon the other week by a pastor that I really like in America, and he was making a very similar point. He was saying that he wanted to get fit, and then in his sermon he did 10 press-ups and then said, well, look at my muscles, and of course there's nothing there because he's not done the work yet. We want the lifestyle, but are we willing to put the work in? The same thing for the stuff. We say we want to live less busy lives, but will we actually make the changes that need to happen in order to do that?
You spoke earlier about, you used the word burden, and the idea of actually lifting burdens from ourselves, and it's usually that burdens are our own making. We've committed to something, and we've created this burden. And there's this bit in Matthew's Gospel, which actually we looked at as a church very recently. And it's Matthew 11, and he talks about come to me who are laboured and tired, and I will give you rest. And cast your burdens onto me. That's what you're saying. But it also says, and I will take your yoke onto me, and I'll give you mine. And what he's saying, actually, yoke is this, use of yoke is actually the milkmaids with the wooden bar across and the cattle. It's connecting. What he was saying is that how we shoulder the things of this world, our family, our work, our responsibilities, how we shoulder it. And Jesus is saying, my yoke, my way of shouldering these things is easy. And part of me is thinking, actually, following Jesus, the idea of committing committing to following him, for a lot of people, it isn't easy because, you know, he also says elsewhere, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. I says, well, how is that? You're saying on one hand, you know, we've got to carry our cross. And on another hand, you're saying that my yoke, my way of life is easy. Yeah. And so, so the issue is actually, well, how can it be easy? Well, it's easy when we look at actually what it means to follow Jesus. And it's just picking up on what you said. If we follow, say, I'll follow Jesus, I'll go to church, I'll read the Bible, I'll do a bit of prayer, but we don't invest, and that's another thing about time, we don't invest our time, our life, our energy, our heart, our soul, we don't invest ourselves into that, then it isn't going to be easy. And I think that's certainly something, as you said, you know, the idea of training. Jesus, we are his apprentice. We learn from him. And that means becoming like him. We're not, in that sense, we are limited, but the idea, our journey is becoming like him. He is the source of life. And it's a way of life rather than just something that we flit in and out of. It's a way of life. And in order for that to become a way of life, we've got to invest wholeheartedly into it. And then that yoke, that way of life, Jesus' way of life, becomes, as he says, easy. You know, how do we love our enemy? That's what he says. How do we love our enemy? Is that easy? No. But if we've done the work, if we continue to invest our whole life into this, then yeah, it becomes a way of life. It's not something that's, you know, alien to us. It's something that we just do. So yeah, so that was a big thing for me.
I think one of the things that really jumped out for me was towards the end of the section we read. I don't know about you, but so often when I feel busy and tired, the mindset that we all get into, and I've heard so many people say it in the last couple of weeks around, I just need a holiday. I just need a break. I just need some time off. And actually, we live our lives, don't we? And we know it's busy. We know that there's something kind of deeply unhealthy about it, but we just hold on for the next break. And then we can get into a whole level of debate about, do we actually take our time off? But that's another discussion for another time. But actually, we live just kind of busy lives, and we know it's unhealthy, but just live for that break. Actually, John Mark Comer is quite clear that Jesus' way isn't about an escape. It isn't about kill yourself with busyness to then have an escape. Instead, what Jesus wants to bring into our lives is not an escape, but equipment to deal with the busyness, not just to provide us a break from it. And what we're going to see, I think, in the next part of the book is some of these different bits of equipment that will help us get this busyness thing under task. But actually, for me, I don't know if you're preaching through Romans at the moment. We are at St. Luke's looking at Romans and the easy bits and the difficult bits of those kind of chapters. We've been really wrestling. But actually, this week in Romans, the start of Romans 8, Paul speaks about if we want to get our lives in the spirit, we need to reset our thinking. And actually, perhaps around this busyness stuff, that's one of the biggest things that needs to happen. We need to reset our thinking, to get our thinking not on the ways of the world and everybody's busy, this is how it's supposed to be. But actually, if we really want to get into this Jesus stuff, this Jesus thinking you were just talking about, we need to reset our lives so that we're not just living for the next escape, but living lives with the help of some equipment in order to live life to the full now. So for me, I'm quite excited reading this section of the book because I'm thinking this is tying into what God's saying to us as a church and in our sermons. What does it look like? But actually, what would it look like in my life, not just to push on through for the next escape, but start to live life with some of this equipment so that I can live life to the full all year round and not just on my times of annual leave.
Yeah. And it's I've read up on this quite a lot, and actually I nearly did this, but it's talking about this rule of life, is this structure that we build, and they use the example of a trellis and a vine, the idea that actually the only way that a vine can grow is as this structure, this trellis to grow from. And obviously that many of the monastic orders have this structure during the day, and you know, we can joke about, you know, it becoming a habit, you know, we can do all that, you know, that's all funny, but actually it is true that the way they structure their day. And I know we spoke last time about the clock, the invention of the clock being a robber of we've artificially created these areas. But obviously in the monastic order, that is there's certain parts of the day we do this, we do that, and it's there as a foundation, as a structure, as a bit to build on. And I think that certainly speaks to me about certain things that we need to feed into our schedule. You said that, didn't you? That actually will allow us, part of the equipment, allow us to do this. And I nearly signed up to the Order St Benedict to be an oblate. Yeah, I know. Look at me. And I didn't. And but what I did do for a time, is that I had emails come into me at various parts of the day saying, why don't you do this? And this is a time for this. And so it encouraged me to, it did. I mean, I unfortunately I left it, but it was for a time, I needed it. But the monastic order isn't for everyone, but actually it does tell us that, this trellis and vine, firm foundation to build our life around. So, yeah.
Hey Dave, just as you were saying that around the order of stuff, one of the kind of really interesting things that's happened for St Luke's, I know it's also true at Ascension, is around observing morning prayer together at 9 o'clock. I know you guys do evening prayer, we do Compline a bit later. But actually the amount of people that have come back and kind of said, look, in a world where there isn't much structure or rhythm at the moment, one thing that's really kept me going through lockdown, I'm sure it's true for people at Ascension too, is having this kind of morning prayer. I get up in time for morning prayer. I look forward to receiving Compline. There's something about the passing of time and some of that structures that we're talking about. If you told both me and you 6 months ago that we would both be doing daily morning prayer on Facebook and that people would be still engaging in it 100 days in, finding it helpful for setting a rhythm in a time that's rhythmless, we would have thought we'd both lost our minds. Like, if you want to know how to grow people in a practice of prayer, if you want to form community, actually the daily offices are where it's at, and actually what are we learning through this pandemic? Actually a rhythm of prayer is really helpful for a whole host of reasons. And it's been one of these, as you're talking about kind of Benedictine monastic structures, that's the whole point of having kind of morning prayer and evening prayer to ground our whole day in prayer. And it's been really fascinating watching people perhaps engage in this rhythm of doing it this way is one of, I think, the real beauties, and hopefully something that will continue post-pandemic,
Yeah, I think certainly I've spoken to many people who, and you can tell when you click the go live button on Facebook, you can tell who people are waiting. They're gearing up, and if I was a betting man, I know who's first, and then follows a quick second, and so they're not gearing their life around it, but they're using it as a structure, as you say, because in this pandemic we can lose hours, days. What day is it? And so that has created a structure for them. No, very, very good. So talking of prayer,
can I make one more point before you run this? Or are you wanting to make another point, or are you moving to?
No, I'm fine. I got to that bit about structure, and then no, go for it.
So just one more point and for me, this has been something that I have been dwelling on since one of the final points our chapter made, and I started to bring it in preaching on Sunday. But John Mark Comer kind of comes to a point right at the end of the chapter saying, look, are you going to engage in this or are you not? And he uses the line, and it's so damning. Are most of us just too busy to follow Jesus? Are we just too busy for God? Is that the reality of our situation? Have we filled our lives with the desires of the world, maybe with people pleasing, satisfying this? Are we just too busy? Does God just fit in an hour and a half box on a Sunday? And maybe on a week where you're not busy, you might think about going to Bible study or a prayer meeting. But God should just be really pleased that you've given him 2.5 hours in your week. And again, maybe it comes back to like resetting our thinking. But actually, that's like, if you hear that line and it doesn't challenge you to your heart, are you engaged in any way at all? Like, am I just too busy for God? And if that's true, what am I going to do about that? Like, what's the change that's required? Because I wasn't too busy.
Thank you for, yeah.
I wasn't too busy to watch Netflix. I wasn't too busy to go to the gym when we were allowed to do it. Like, I wasn't too busy to waste time on Instagram, but I got to the point where I felt too busy to pray or too busy to read scripture. But that is, for me, that's the comment that I want to dwell and think about. Like, am I just too busy to adopt this lifestyle? Do you know?
And thank you for reminding me, because that was one of the things, because he uses the example, if for instance you're married and your husband or your wife came up to you and said, look, I think our marriage is sort of falling apart or whatever, can we just have half an hour or an hour just to talk through stuff? And if your response is, no, I haven't got time,
yeah,
then what does that say about your marriage? If your child comes up to you and says, actually, can you spend half an hour with me? I haven't seen you all day. And we say, no, I haven't got time. What does that say about our relationship with our child? It's exactly the same as that you said, our relationship, our faith. If we can't spend half an hour or an hour, either in prayer or reading scripture, or or the other things that we're called to do, then what does that say about our relationship with Jesus?
right.
Yeah, there was a very powerful point. I'm glad you made it. It certainly reminded me. Because it means we go on.
No, I'm just laughing. Saying, let's have another 2 minutes for this point before we move on.
If only we had more time.
Discuss the book at length. Honestly, like, I've just been saying in morning prayer the last couple of days, like, I cannot recommend this book more highly. Like, you want to be convicted, but if you want to be encouraged that a different way is possible, get a hold of this book, borrow it once Dave and I are finished. Like, this book I have found challenging and convicting, but also you can hear in the way that me and also Dave are talking, like, life-giving too. And we've already both, I think, started to put little changes in place in response to this book. You were saying that you're now reading in the evenings rather than just watching TV. I've booked some time in Scotland. It's about how do we actually read this stuff, be challenged, but then make changes.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Anything else you want to add before I pray?
No, I think we said it all, and I think the great one to end on. If we after all of this, if we say, when Jesus says follow me, and we say, oh, we're too busy, then actually what does that say? And I maybe liken it to another loving relationship that we have. That we maybe, whether it's a husband or wife, boyfriend or girlfriend, our children, maybe our parents, and if someone came up to you and asked you, can you spend half an hour with me? I'm going through some tough stuff, or I haven't seen you all day. Can we have some fun? And you say, no, I'm too busy. Then what does that say? We need prayer.
Yeah, definitely.
Amy, let's pray for us.
Lord God, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your way of life. Lord, we thank you that your burden is light, your yoke is easy. Lord, I just pray, Lord, in the midst of our busyness, in the midst of hurrying, in the midst of a world that is all about being limitless, Lord, would you help us to reset our thinking? Lord, would you help us to prioritize our days, our minds? Lord, would we prioritize our time with you? Would we not be wasting time procrastinating or on things that are meaningless, but would we start and end our day in a desire to want to know you more, to grow in our walk with you? Lord, would you help us to take seriously our limitations and not to see them as weakness, but instead to trust you more for the things we need to receive from you? Lord, would you help us to take seriously some of these challenges around wanting a lifestyle, but then being prepared to put the work in? Lord, around perhaps considering whether we are just too busy in order to grow in our walk with you. Lord, show us what can go, that we might have the time and the effort and the willpower to keep going in our walk with you. Lord, as we continue in the weeks ahead to look at some of the equipment that you have given us, Lord, help us to order our days, that we wouldn't just be looking for the next escape, the next break, but instead that we would live lives that thrive each and every day where we live life in full freedom and in full purpose, Lord, in you we pray. So be with us in the day ahead, in the week ahead. Lead and guide us, grow us in our walk with you. Help us to hand over to you our burdens and our busyness, and instead receive back from you a different way of doing life, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, yeah, it was always great to chat, Dave. I think for next week, we just want to be clear, if people are reading along with us, we're going to look at the section that's called the intermission.
Yep.
And John Mark Comer is going to unpack 4 different topics. So we're going to look at the intermission, and the first one that he's going to unpack, which is
silence and solitude.
Great, looking forward to it already. For two people who don't know how to stop talking, it's going to be a great set. So
cheers, Amy. Really good. And we'll see you next time.
See you.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.